All right, man, peace. So the great Terrell Owens was officially inducted into the NFL Hall of Fame this past weekend. And for those of you brothers who listened to my previous video on Terrell Owens and whether or not he should have attended the official induction at the NFL Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio, you know what my take is on that. I believe that he should have attended, not only because he could have told off the so-called reporters, quote unquote, really propagandists, who were directly involved in deciding whether or not he deserved to enter into the NFL Hall of Fame, but also he could have went in along with many of the other great players of that era, because that's truly what the induction is about. That's a way to encapsulate a certain era, especially with players that are inducted on the first, second, or third time on the ballot. So when I think of Ray Lewis, or when I think of Randy Moss, or when I think of Brian Dawkins, I also think of Terrell Owens, because those were the great players of that late 90s to early 2010s era. All throughout the 2000s, they were dominant. And I think that Terrell Owens should have considered that, but I think that that's part of the issue that he has. I think that Terrell Owens is dealing with a lot of personal baggage in regards to his belief that he's been victimized, not just during his NFL career, but for his whole life, and he's tired of it, and this is his way of trying to empower himself. So once again, I think that when you're truly trying to understand a personality type like a Terrell Owens, you have to be very receptive to where he's coming from, his personal history, his family life, and things of that nature. So anyway, they're going to talk about his official induction, and I'm going to chime in.
This is SportsCenter right now. I'm Antonieta Collins. Over the weekend, Terrell Owens celebrated his induction to the Pro Football Hall of Fame the way he wanted, at his alma mater. Delivering an emotional 40-minute speech, T.O. made it clear once again as to why he chose the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga over Canton.
There's been a lot of speculation and false reports as to why I chose not to be there. I would like to set the record straight. It's not because how many times it took for me to be voted into the Hall. It's about the mere fact that the sports writers are not in alignment with the mission and core values of the Hall of Fame.
I partially agree with that, but everything that he's stating right here, he should have said at the official Hall of Fame induction in Canton, Ohio.
I wanted to take a stand.
Well, brother, you're not really taking a stand, because they're not going to change their protocol because of you. As a matter of fact, all they're going to do is provide a little nip and tuck on their protocol so that it never happens again.
So the next guy coming after me will not have to go through what I and others have gone through.
I will say this, I think that many of the sports writers will think twice before they try that again, because it was clearly a publicity stunt. Not on the part of the NFL Hall of Fame, but on the part of the sports writers. This was their way to show Terrell Owens, we're going to take our pound of flesh out of your ass and let you twist in the wind a little bit. But as I've stated in previous videos in regards to this whole Terrell Owens Hall of Fame narrative, the only reason why I believe they even allowed him into the NFL in his third season of eligibility is because Randy Moss was going to be allowed into the NFL Hall of Fame on his first season of eligibility. Why is that? Who knows? Maybe it's because during this period of time where Randy Moss has worked with ESPN, maybe he's been able to re-ingratiate himself with many members of the NFL media. And they understood that if they were to allow Randy Moss in on his first year of eligibility and not allow Terrell Owens in for a third straight year, it would have been glaringly obvious that they had a personal vendetta against T.O., and it would have proved his point. So to just make him go a little bit crazier, they decided to allow him into the Hall of Fame in the same year as Randy Moss.
Whether it's 3 years or 45 years, you should get what you rightfully earned.
By the way, Owens didn't take much time to celebrate his Hall of Fame induction. On Sunday, the 44-year-old worked out for the CFL Saskatchewan Roughriders. Owens hasn't played professionally since he was cut by the Seahawks during the 2012 preseason. For more, let's get you back to First Take.
All right, so Owens making it clear his problem is that the sports writers are not in alignment with the mission and core values of the Hall of Fame. On that note, we welcome an NFL insider, our friend Josina Anderson. Jojo, thanks for being with us.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. I appreciate it.
I want that level of excitement from every guest.
You want me to raise the roof
Yes.
and lower it down?
Yes.
Jojo, I want to start with you. What was your reaction to the speech?
Well, I understand his emotion and where he's coming from. I think I spoke to Terrell Owens probably about twice a week for the last month and a half on the phone. So I knew how resolute he was on not changing his mind about going to Canton, and his feelings about the fact that the Hall of Fame process is flawed and that it should be more about the football resume and less about what you do off the field and or what your relationship with the media is. He spent about 35 minutes of that speech thanking people who helped him get to the Hall of Fame, and in the last 5 minutes talking about his relationship with the media. And obviously, 48 media members are involved in putting the people who are inducted into the Hall of Fame into Canton. And
I think that one of the main ways that you can resolve this issue is to no longer make the voting practice anonymous. All you have to do is make it more transparent. Let's see if many of these media members will be as willing to enact or perpetuate any type of personal vendetta when everybody knows that they're the ones who decided to not vote for Terrell Owens to be allowed into the Hall of Fame because he would not grant them an interview back in 2001, or because he just left his locker and didn't answer any questions in 2004. Silly shit like that. Let's see how willing Joe Blow, who writes for the Pensacola Gazette, will be to acknowledge that the reason why he's not allowing Terrell Owens into the Hall of Fame is because of a personal issue like that, when everybody knows that he's the one who did it.
And he doesn't like it. So it's not just about the fact that it took long, it's about the fact that he feels like it's inconsistent and it's not fair, let alone his relationship with the media too, that soured almost at the beginning of his career.
Look, I'm with T.O. on this.
Surprise, surprise. Of course you're with T.O. You're a discordianist. You love discord. You love entropy. You love confusion. You're a modern-day super liberal, woke, Caucasian Jew. You're always going to be willing to put a battery in the back of the emotionally disturbed and upset, woke black athlete.
I'm with him on it. You should get what you've earned. That should not be affected by the way someone finds your personality maybe abrasive or some way not what they're comfortable with.
Look, there's no doubt that Terrell Owens should have been a first ballot Hall of Famer. But the fact that he had to wait 3 ballots and he's that upset about it, I don't particularly have a grievance with how upset he was. I just believe that it would have been a far more potent image if he would have taken on a lot of the protocol, the standards, the practices of the Hall of Fame voting process while he was actually there in Canton.
It's interesting that in the medical profession, malpractice suits are much more about bedside manner than they should be. They should be much more about results, right? If the results all jacked up and there was malfeasance, then malpractice. But it's actually much more correlated with bedside manner. Does the patient like the doctor, right? And essentially what's being told Terrell Owens, or what's being said and what has been said by many who have influence in this process, by some at least, and publicly around the sport, is his bedside manner. In other words, the way he related to players in the locker room, really, because he didn't get any problems off the field, and he balled on the field, so you got to be talking about the locker room. His bedside manner actually had a detrimental effect on his teams. I would like to see the evidence, please. Because if you...
Terrell Owens is an independent, singular type of personality. And it's very common for geniuses in whatever field of endeavor they partake in to feel alienated from those around them. Sometimes they have an independent drive or a singular drive or some type of self-motivation that they feel like sets them apart from others. There's also a certain force that tends to galvanize people who are especially gifted, where they feel like others cannot relate to them particularly well, so they don't waste their time trying to build too many bridges. And of course, in the NFL, wide receivers are known for being a bit quirky when you combine all those things together. I mean, Jerry Rice was not known for being the best team guy. Every once in a while you get a Michael Irvin, but I mean, shit, Michael Irvin played 90% of his career high on coke. So of course he was a fun guy. I mean, allegedly.
If you show me the evidence, I'll say, okay, you know what? Locker room chemistry is a thing. Bedside manner does actually affect results in this case. You want to bring the malpractice suit? Show me some evidence. I do not see the evidence. What I do see is a T.O. team made the Super Bowl. He played on one leg and was the best player on his team.
That's right.
No doubt about it.
He was a Hall of Famer, period. His point is exactly right. You should get what you've earned.
Right, but Max Kellerman, what does this have to do with his decision to have his speech in Chattanooga as opposed to Canton? What exactly is that changing?
Not what the powers that be want to give you based on your attitude toward them.
Neither of you are wrong, but there's more to this story. I don't disagree with anything that y'all said. In my mind, T.O. is a first ballot Hall of Famer. And regardless of his petulance, his childish tendencies at times, because he's an emotional guy, I understand where it emanates from. If you know his story, you know him. And I've known him for many years. I love the guy personally. He's not a liar. Damn it, he don't even curse. You know what I mean? I mean, this is that's how he is. But let's say this and let's tell a story about how it really is. He is a black man.
Get the hell out of here. You know what? I gotta head down to Lens Crafters and see if they can form fit me for some glasses. I had no idea that Terrell Owens was a so-called black man. I'm shocked and appalled.
The closest thing in the African American community to a meritocracy is sports.
Unfortunately, many so-called black people have that mentality. Once again, that's why many of my videos always revolve around the sporting world, because I know that the so-called black man gravitates towards the sports mentality. They adhere to many of the precepts that Mr. Stephen A. Smith is putting forth and will put forth in this segment in regards to sports and their belief that it is a meritocracy. As a matter of fact, sports is a component of the Babylonian Kemetic mystery school system. And that is why most of the most important championship level tournaments and games are held in days in commemoration of Baal / Osiris, Marduk, whatever you want to call that entity, Pan, etc.
That proverbial glass ceiling that we talk about, all right? Supposedly, that's not supposed to exist in the world of sports. You perform, and nobody can take that away from you.
I have no idea why so many so-called black men embrace that sentiment, or allegedly do, because sports has always been filled with certain elements of racism to this very day. There's certainly a lack of belief, or at least implicit lack of belief, in the proficiency of the so-called black quarterback. Even today, in Major League Baseball, there are very few so-called black American pitchers that are allowed to stay pitchers. Most of them are moved to the outfield. In basketball, you have a far higher chance of becoming a head coach if you're a Caucasian man sitting at the end of the bench as the 12th man, basically just collecting splinters in your ass, than you do if you're a star so-called black basketball player on the team. I promise you that Kyle Korver will have a better chance of becoming an NBA head coach than a Kevin Durant will.
That's why black folks everybody always assuming that it's just about the money. No, it ain't just about the money. It's not just about the love of the sport. It's because if I go out there and perform, you can't deny me. You put somebody else on the court or the field to play against me, and I smoked them. How can you deny that?
Well, Stephen A. Smith, let me say this. I agree with you from a certain perspective that sports can be considered a meritocracy when we're going strictly by the measurables. But when we start to introduce subject matter like the eye test or certain idiosyncrasies that cannot be quantified, that's when the racial aspect will become far more obvious. And if there were ever a case where a Caucasian could run the 40-yard dash as fast as a black man, if they both ran at the same time, you would see the sentiment start to lean more towards the Caucasian. The fact of the matter is that in certain sports, it's just too obvious that the so-called black male athlete is superior. So it's not really a question of race per se. It's more a question of, are we going to pick that black guy or this black guy over here?
You can't take that away from us. You can't sit up there and politic and...
And as a matter of fact, you have many Caucasian athletes who will assert the opposite. They will claim that sports is not a meritocracy. It's really just a forum for reverse racism. Because you've had many prominent Caucasian athletes like Jason Sehorn or other athletes like a Jordy Nelson who will claim that people act shocked and surprised when they can run fast or when they can catch the football or when they have fast twitch muscle fibers, when they're able to elude black defensive backs, or when they're able to cover a black wide receiver. People act shocked towards them. So race is always going to be a factor in Babylon.
Network and find a way to diminish our value, what our worth is, and who we are. That's why black folks stand up and love and gravitate towards sports. And what T.O. is saying is they found a way to do it to me anyway.
That's a valid point, sir.
They found a way to do it to me anyway. You know, I'm top 3 all-time in receptions. I'm top 3 all-time in touchdowns. I'm top 6 all-times in yards for receiving. And you still found a way to screw me over. How is that possible? And by the way,
hold on. Say to those who said Randy Moss, who also was accused of loafing on plays.
That's right.
Well, not also, because T.O. wasn't accused of that. Was in first base.
Well, that's one of the biggest problems, because I brought up.
Well, that's a problem until you start to analyze the possibility, the probability, in my view, that Randy Moss was able to reingratiate himself. He was able to build a certain rapport with the NFL media due to his position as an ESPN NFL anchor.
And he mentioned that.
I brought up how T.O., you know, he could sit there and try to hide it all he wants to, but Randy Moss being the first ballot Hall of Famer was a slap in his face because...
Absolutely, no doubt about it. That was a huge slap in his face.
We love Randy. He's our contemporary here. Got mad love for him. He was fantastic Saturday night, by the way, and I appreciate that tie that he was wearing with those who were victims, including Tamir Rice. You know,
another internet revolutionary woke Negro empty gesture.
Due to police brutality, Randy Moss, my love for you, brother. Thank you. But let's be clear. Randy Moss was on a record one time saying I play when I want to.
Absolutely.
And there were times in his career where he took time off. There were times when we looked at Randy Moss and said he could do more, he could be more.
Why
we never said that about
T.O., but not Randy Moss is my question.
Because you have people, well, I'm not saying it's racial about T.O.
You're saying that's part of his indignation.
I'm saying that's part of the indignation. I'm not saying that played a role in it all. But you also have to understand, the media, and this is where we look bad, the Hall of Fame, T.O. messed up in regards to them because they're not the ones who bring him in.
That's my point.
Okay, the Hall of Fame was there to celebrate him. Okay, and
that's how you know that it was short-sighted and emotional. That's one of the main shortcomings of the so-called black man in this society. Brothers make too many emotional decisions. Once again, we're human beings. We're going to get emotional. We're going to get indignant. We're going to get passionate about certain issues. But we have to know what it is that's actually worth exploding over and what's not. There are certain issues that can be resolved. So if it can be resolved, let's take a moment and resolve them, as opposed to allowing ourselves to be emotionally manipulated about every single thing and every little thing. But once again, we're all human. There are going to be situations that transpire where we might lose it for a moment. We might lose it for a couple of moments. We might have to tell certain people about themselves, especially if they're coming at us with fuckery and nonsense. But overall, we cannot allow ourselves to be puppeted by everyone. And the so-called black man has to grasp this. Once the people around you know that you can be manipulated emotionally, that you don't have much control over your emotional or your mental state, your psychological disposition, they will go about seeing where they can poke and prod and lead you about to frustrate you.
By the way, let's not ignore the fact that when you go into the Hall of Fame, a team usually picks you. They celebrate you. They throw a party for you. Jerry Jones threw a party for himself that scored $16 million the one night with Justin Timberlake performing for 2 hours. Okay, yeah, this is what they do. We don't know whether it was the Eagles, the Eagles, the 49ers, the Bengals, Buffalo, whomever. We don't know if anybody wanted to spend that kind of money on T.O., so that's a problem too. But in the end, what it comes down to is this, my last point.
And that last point that he made was a great point.
It comes down to this. T.O. with the media looks bad today. And the reason why the media looks bad today is it's supposed to be merit. Anybody could come out and say, I don't like him.
Well, Stephen A. Smith, let's be for real for a moment. Has the media ever been an arbiter for a meritocracy? I mean, ever. Certainly not over the past 25 years, since the debate format has become more and more pervasive, starting with ESPN, but now pretty much on every sports network. These analysts and sports pundits get held accountable for the statements that they make pertaining to athletes' personality types, their dispositions, and your own personal assertions or opinions about how a person should act or conduct themselves, or whether or not you like someone. I mean, let's be for real. Skip Bayless has made a career on certain athletes and whether or not he liked or didn't like them. So maybe it's time to take the voting process totally away from the media and just give it to the current NFL Hall of Famers and let them decide.
He was a distraction because I, as a person that covered T.O. and Donovan McNabb in Philly, half the dudes didn't approve of T.O.'s behavior. Half of them had no problem with it. They were looking at McNabb. And so as a result of that, all you can go by definitively is the man's performance. Yep. And in our society, when they take your performance away.
Let me say this about Stephen A. Smith's statement about while he was covering the Philadelphia Eagles that half the locker room sided with T.O. and the other half sided with Donovan McNabb. That can be used as an indictment against T.O. if we were to hold that evaluation in juxtaposition to what percentage of the Philadelphia Eagles squad was on the side of Donovan McNabb before T.O. got there. If the team was uniformly on the side of Donovan McNabb the year before Terrell Owens got there, then one can certainly say that Terrell Owens acted as an agent of chaos in that locker room. We can't just look at the season that he was there and say, well, half the team was on his side, half the team wasn't. We have to look at it in juxtaposition to, in comparison to, what the overall team camaraderie was like and how they viewed Donovan McNabb the year before T.O. got there. Because sometimes a variable can be injected into an equation or into a formula and totally throw off the solution, totally throw off the answer. At one time, Donovan McNabb may have been the unquestioned leader of the locker room. And you get a T.O. in there, and now there's a major fracture.
Away from you, particularly when you're a black man. What else can't they take from you if they can deny or delay what you have earned?
That's what he's speaking to. I want to know if you guys have the same sentiment here as far as the media. Do you feel like the media looks poor after this?
No worse than they did already in the first place. But I will say this, Josina, about Stephen A's point.
When these guys talk about the media, they're talking about the print media because they no longer consider themselves a part of the print media. Now their job is to professionally opine on current events.
I appreciate you're not saying it's racial per se. You're saying that in the layers of indignation, race is ever present. It's not that, well, Moss got in first, he's also a black man. That's not really what I got that. Right. And I think the meritocracy point's a good one because sports is scoreboard. Oh, you don't like the package I'm wrapped up in? You don't like my attitude? Scoreboard. And T.O. is there going scoreboard. That says first ballot. Oh, now it's as though at the end of a game you're winning by a couple touchdowns, and the refs just say, but we didn't like your attitude. We'll give it to the other team. Go ahead.
I understand your attempt at a point, Max Kellerman, but it stops being scoreboard when there's a validation process known as the Hall of Fame voting process, where you actually have to have some level of appeal to the voters. And when your appeal is the primary parameter for whether or not you're going to be accepted, it's no longer about scoreboard. That's Terrell Owens' contention in the first place.
Well, you're right. Sports is supposed to be a platform where it's equitable. And you were mentioning that, his performance and everything that was going on in the locker room didn't translate on the field. So where was the gap? So perhaps it's the relationship with the media as opposed to the people in the locker room. And although you mentioned that half the locker room in Philly, like McNabb, half of them like T.O., it didn't translate into his performance or his production on the field. And that's where everything that he is illuminating is definitely just. And the question for you, Stephen A., is whether you feel like, or also Max and Molly, if he could have made that point also in Canton.
I felt he could have made that point. I felt he should have made that point. Had it been me, I'd have went to Canton. But I would have went to Canton with the same message.
Absolutely, that's the point, sir. You go to Canton and you confront your accusers to their face and you shame them to their face. Remember, T.O. also played on the same squad as Brian Dawkins, and according to Skip Bayless, Brian Dawkins is on record as stating that T.O. was a source of problems in the locker room.
I went to Chattanooga, but I'd have brought that message to Canton.
I think he could have brought the message to Canton, but no ill will. He's just doing it his way, and I feel like that's true to his...
Yeah, but you know what? Just because you can do it your way does not necessarily mean that you should. You have to evaluate everything from a pragmatic approach, from a pragmatic perspective. What exactly is he gaining by doing that? Is this move going to have any form of long-lasting reverberation? Is it going to set a new standard or a trend? The answer is no, no, and no.
True to his character.
Can I personalize it real quick for the purposes of First Take? Thanks to Molly and Max, not only we have a top-rated show, #1 in cable from 10 a.m. to noon, but folks, when there were layoffs that took place here, they were writing that, I should have lost my job. Why Stephen A. there? And I'm sitting there going like this, wait a minute. The revenue? The rate?
Well, that's not really what you said, brothers. You really went up to the boss's office with a printout of those emails and you said, wait a minute, boss. Wait, hold up, master. You have the audacity this Saturday to unmitigated gall to consider letting me go? Hell no. Master, I'm chaining myself to the First Take desk. I'm chaining myself to this desk. And if you dare try to fire me, I promise you, everybody's going to know about this shit.
Ratings? I thought we were in the television business. So you talking about, in other words, that's right. I literally went on the air on ESPN radio and went ballistic because I'm like, excuse me, what comes along with this business that we're in is ratings and revenue.
Well, wait a minute, Stephen A. Smith. I thought you had alligator skin. Why would you be that concerned with people saying that you should be fired when you know that you have a top-rated show? Once again, allegedly, you're not sensitive to what people are saying about you.
Last time I checked, I'm doing all right. How I need to be going.
One day, Stephen A. Smith's tight-ass collar's gonna pop when he take his glasses off and get mad.
These are the kind of things that black men have to deal with. And it's a problem, and it needs to stop.
Well, you know what, brother? What really needs to stop? You need to stop working for ESPN. You need to create your own platform. You're relatively famous on an international scale, on a global scale. Why are you still working at ESPN and allowing yourself to be held hostage by the opinion of people that you claim you don't care about? You could be on Facebook with your own radio show or your own television program, per se. You could be on YouTube. You can create your own website. Why are you still worried about what people are saying about you and then trying to use the excuse, or really the reason, that so-called black men are held to a higher standard? Of course we are. Of course we are. We have to accept and embrace that. And once we no longer care about the standards that are created for us by others, watch how quickly these other groups try to appeal to us once they see that we no longer care. They continue to terrorize the so-called black man because they see that we care about how they feel about us.
You know what? I think he was heard this weekend. Microaggressions.
There we go.
But I think his point was made, and he was heard this weekend. So congratulations again to T.O.
Congratulations, T.O.
First ballot.
I'm not quite sure if his point was made. I think that he got what he wanted, which was an extra amount of attention and the ability to have the spotlight all to himself.
Cena, great to see you.
Yes, thank you guys.
All day. Appreciate your time.
But anyway, that's basically it on Terrell Owens and his speech in Chattanooga, Tennessee. So peace.